Welcome, Kim.
Welcome, Karyn.
It has been a minute.
Yeah, my tone is not appropriate
No.
for what we're about to talk about.
Yeah, so it's been a minute longer than I had hoped that it would be.
Yes.
But I come to you and to our listeners today with one, some good news about season 2.
Woo!
Number 2, some new content.
Uh-huh.
And 3, a personal update about why it took me longer than I wanted to start recording these episodes. So I'm choosing to start with the hard stuff first so that we can end on a positive note.
Because you're very brave.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
2025 has been let me check my notes here, bad year. And I wish it was over already. It's been a bad year for a lot of people, but aside from the general horrors that persist, I've had a personally terrible year so far. So on New Year's Day, my grandpa passed, which is a hell of a way to start the year. I did post about that a couple times on our social media. And listeners might remember that one of our earlier episodes about the Dines, I got pretty emotional talking about my grandpa, in part because his life story and the kind of grandpa he was to me is emotional, but also in part due to the fact that when we recorded that last year, his health had already been on the decline. And I definitely did not feel any more prepared for his passing, even though I knew that it was probably coming soon. So it was just a horrible time. And as you might imagine, my grandma has been taking it really hard. They were married for 69 years. And with my grandma's own health declining, my family had to help her find full-time care at a location. And she had to move in there shortly after Papa passed away. So it was another hard thing after an already difficult time. But I am wearing one of my grandpa's shirts. It says, "My grandkids are perfect just like me."
It's really remarkable.
Thank you.
And it is perfect is written in planks of wood, and there's a hammer and a saw.
Yeah, because he did tools
and assorted nails, and it's just perfection.
I think so too.
It suits you, I would say.
Thank you. Yeah, he was a fairly small man, so his clothes fit me. Actually, some of them are too small for me.
Oh, Grandpa.
That was just the beginning of January.
Yep. Day one.
And I knew that I would have a delay in releasing season 2, which we had planned to release or to start releasing mid-February.
That's correct.
But I found myself having a difficult time juggling family hardships, my work, my day job. And I didn't leave a lot of space, both in time and emotion, to do the very time-consuming research that goes into our episodes. If you didn't already know, I actually do all of the research by myself. So it is time-consuming.
When we're saying hours,
we're saying hours. Oh, no, we're saying weeks and months sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a lot. I'm not complaining. I love doing it. It's just, it took us a while to do it. But some of that got cleared up because I lost my job. And let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So I haven't spoken about my job on this podcast because I never really saw a need to. And I liked keeping them separate. But you and we haven't shied away from voicing our opinions.
Certainly not.
We have talked about American politics on this podcast. And now my job is a pretty hot topic of American politics at the minute. Rather, my previous job as of a couple weeks ago. For the last 4 years, I worked for USAID, which is our United States Agency for International Development. And up until January 20th, whenever I told people that I worked for them, 90% of the time, they were like, I don't know what that is.
Correct.
Because most people didn't know.
Nope.
And in case you're lucky enough to not have seen the news over the last month and you still don't know what USAID is, it's our government's humanitarian aid and international development agency. Basically, we give to other countries things like healthcare, education, etc. And over the next few minutes, I would like to discuss what happened to me and to my agency. I know that this isn't me talking about the podcast or genealogy work, but this was a traumatic experience that I am uniquely placed to talk about. And not just a personal traumatic experience. This has been a pretty widespread traumatic experience. And so maybe there's someone listening who actually just lost their job at one of our other agencies, or maybe there's those who are under continual duress, because the public discourse around federal workers right now is that they're lazy, they steal taxpayer dollars, and it just feels important to me to tell my story so that others know they're not alone and that we shine a light on the cruelty that's happening, because I really believe that these things fester in the darkness of silence. So this is me not being silent about it. If you want to skip to the end to hear about season 2 and the new content, that's totally fine. But I would love to just kind of speak about my experience. If that's okay with you, Kim.
Of course. I'm just gearing myself up to be sad again.
I know it is. This is going to be heavy to talk about. I mean, it's heavy for me. I just lost my grandfather. I lost my job. It's been a really, really hard year.
But please don't be scared of the heavy stuff, I say to listeners, because this is an important part of being a creator.
Yeah.
In any space, is that when things are falling apart around you in your life, for anyone to expect you to create as if that's nothing is bonkers.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, what a lot of creative people felt in the pandemic. It was like, well, I have all this time now. I should be, making a whole album, as if there was an absolute terror everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And the same is happening now.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard to have space in your brain for the things that you enjoy when your body's in fight or flight. Mm-hmm. Not to laugh. I'm sorry. I feel like I laugh at the end of every single hard sentence that I say.
I mean, we otherwise we'll spend this time sobbing,
just crying.
Yeah, and we've done plenty of that collectively.
Yeah, I'm done crying. That's not true.
Super not true.
Just give me 5 minutes. Kim, you already know this, but I really loved my job, and a career in international development was actually something I hadn't planned on. It was an unconventional path based on my past experience, but it ended up being something that I knew would be my career until I retired. Especially over the last year, I had started working on things that were just so challenging, so interesting, and so fulfilling. I really felt, God, the hubris. I felt over the year of 2024, consciously thinking about how my life was in this really amazing upswing. I had this job that I liked, that it was fulfilling. I put out this podcast with you, and that was fulfilling my creative passions. And I had built a family with all of my friends, with my partner, Ben, our sound engineer.
Woo-woo.
And I knew that these were the people I was going to grow old with. This was the life that I was going to settle into. And I was really content picturing the rest of my life like that. And I know a lot of people don't know me like that, but contentment has been a lifelong struggle for me. So to feel contentment, it's a huge deal for me. And up until 2025, literally day one, I really felt or actually, even when my grandpa passed, I remember saying this is a horrible thing. It's hard that there's this horrible thing that happened, but I feel like the rest of my life is going in this amazing direction.
Mm-hmm.
So there's these two feelings inside of me. And then life said, oh, you think one part's going well? I'll fix that. So from the very first week that Trump was in office, him and his administration and the unelected billionaire with his child interns, they have terrorized USAID.
And I think that we need to specify, when you say child interns, we are quite literally looking at 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds.
Just breaking into federal buildings.
Which is so frightening.
Yeah.
I think regardless of how you feel about the administration as a whole, that is just terrifying.
Yeah. They have no idea how the federal government works, and they're just kind of running through and breaking things for their amusement. But specifically, they had targeted USAID. We got a very special zone in on. And they definitely have moved on to other government entities now and terrorizing them. But for the first 3 weeks, we were a very special target. And within the first week, the administration put the USAID stop work order into effect. And what that was it froze every single program that USAID was working on, every single program. So Ebola and bird flu research and tracking, that was shut down. HIV/AIDS healthcare shut down. Food distribution shut down. And the original wording was supposed to be that it would stop for 90 days, which was troubling enough because there's huge effects that could happen in 90 days. But we still were under the assumption that after 90 days, we could rebuild again.
Mm.
But then almost from the jump, Elon and Trump started a misinformation campaign about USAID, all while they were illegally trying to dismantle it. Elon, if you aren't familiar with it, owns a platform called X, and he likes to weaponize it these days. So he made dozens of tweets calling USAID evil, a criminal organization. He said it needed to die. And then he made a joke that he spent one weekend feeding it into the wood chipper instead of going to parties that he for sure would have been invited to.
It's so violent.
It was very violent. And then he said that we were not an apple with one worm in it. We were just a ball of worms. And then the president of these United States said that USAID was filled with worms after Elon said that. So people that have taken oaths to serve this country were called worms by their elected leader. And he also called everyone that worked at USAID a radical lunatic. So I don't know if you've ever been called out by your elected leader as a worm, but I have. I've been called out. And that felt pretty terrible. Once Trump and Elon start bullying anyone, whether it's an organization or a country, it doesn't take long before their millions of followers mobilize to attack whomever or whatever it is.
Yep.
So over the course of the next 2 weeks, I saw the people of this country, whom USAID served, throw so much vitriol and hate our way. It was like a nonstop barrage of hate towards us. And there were calls to investigate the people who I worked with. Recently, actually, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she actually was in a House committee meeting last week and started calling from the House that there should be criminal investigations into like USAID leadership. So it's not just the public that's saying these things. It's starting to come from our elected leaders. And inside USAID, I watched around 60 top officials immediately get put on administrative leave under the false pretense that they weren't abiding by the executive orders that were put out by Trump, which was not the case because the head of RHR, one of his emails was leaked. And it was an email of him saying, I can't terminate these 60 people because there was no due cause. I cannot find due cause to terminate them. And when he sent that email, he got put on leave. He got taken out. And then there was the case where the Doge children broke into our USAID headquarters and they attempted to access our classified spaces without any kind of government clearance. And when our security prevented them, those security officers were put on leave and the Doge boys just got unfettered access to all of our system, which contained sensitive information about employees like myself and our implementing partners. It still is terrifying. I don't know what they're doing with that information, but they have access to all of it. And then I remember the night that 50% of my personal team was all put on leave just across the board. And then I remember the day that we were told that out of 14,000 USAID employees, only 300 employees would remain employed, basically to help just finish off USAID so that they could recall all of the employees who were overseas. And then, of course, I remember the day, February 12th, when my job was permanently terminated. So up until February 12th, I had close to a month of just like constant blows, like every single day, about like what a terrible person I was for working there, about how much the American people thought what we were doing was a waste of time and just like stealing taxpayer dollars. Since February 12th, some of our workforce was able to hold on because of a court order that blocked layoffs. But last week, that court order was lifted and the rest of my colleagues were either terminated or put on leave. And they walked into the building one last time to gather their things because we had been banned from the building by Elon's child interns for this whole time. And I'm just not exaggerating when I say that USAID and all of us who work there have been terrorized. And don't just take it from me, Kim. And I know you won't because Russell Vogt, have you heard of him?
No, I haven't. But who's he?
Russell Vogt is from the Heritage Foundation,
Mm.
which is the author of Project 2025. And he now leads the U.S. government Office of Personnel Management, which is the office that's kind of like the overall HR of the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
He is on video, I think it was like just last year, speaking on the strategy of dealing with federal workers in 2025. And he says out loud that the strategy is to terrorize them to such an extent that they do not want to show up to work. So the terror and the cruelty weren't byproducts. They were the point. And now thousands of other federal employees have lost their jobs without due process, without reason. And the constant attack from top government leadership, including Trump and Elon, who isn't elected leadership, he's an unelected billionaire, it continues with them claiming that feds would be more useful in private sector jobs. The last thing I'll say about this is I just want to defend the people that I work with, possibly to give some encouragement where little I can. Those people love this country. I've seen it firsthand, and they believe in the work that they did and in the oath that they took. I was in the room with people who sent the first 500 million COVID vaccines to the rest of the world. I watched people who built programs to address gender-based violence, to give women and marginalized people access to safety in countries where that sort of violence was rampant. I've watched people help Afghans who assisted our military and our country while we were in Afghanistan and help them get out of the Taliban-controlled country and safely into the U.S. through our refugee process. And the list goes on, but all of that is gone now. All of it is stopped. And I was looking at some data, a little number crunching, and the World Health Organization believes that over 95 million people will be without healthcare. Over 35 million children will be without access to education. And over 342 million people will experience an agricultural crisis leading to famine. So that's not to mention the over 50,000 jobs that have already been lost globally, mine included. And it's estimated that number will reach over 200,000 jobs that will be lost. And that's just from USAID and humanitarian work. That's not even including the other jobs that are being lost currently in the government. So from the very beginning of this dismantling, it hasn't been about eliminating waste. Nobody went through our programs with a fine-tooth comb. There's millions of dollars worth of already purchased food and medicine spoiling right now in warehouses all over the world, and no one is allowed to touch them. So children are starving in those countries, but we're not allowed to go in and get the food that's spoiling. So the work that USAID did for less than 1% of the federal budget was responsible for a lot of our global stability in countries where our businesses in America source supplies and resources. So we were responsible for containing outbreaks like Ebola and monkeypox. If you haven't gotten Ebola or monkeypox recently in America, you're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And even if you don't care about the starving populations and people dying of HIV/AIDS, which look within if you don't. But for less than 1% of the US budget, we doubled that investment every year by sourcing our food aid from American farmers and by contributing to global stability. Instability is bad for economies. That's just a fact. And the military does a worse job at providing stability at 500 times the cost. So where is the money saved for our taxpayers? Not here, not at all. It's just that ruining people's lives is amusing to Elon and Trump. We've seen it in the way Elon was running around with a chainsaw at CPAC and the way he laughs at the jobs being lost. It is for his amusement that the richest man in the world is taking food and healthcare away from the poorest in the world. I think that USAID was this really easy guinea pig for them to learn how to better dismantle their next targets, like the Consumer and Financial Protections Bureau and the Department of Education. So when I say that I lost my job this year, it hasn't been that I just lost my job. I had a front row seat for almost a month to some of the deepest cruelty I've ever witnessed in my life. And I saw a lot of people in this country either not care about it or energetically support it. And in my opinion, which I think is well-founded, I watched a coup. I watched an administration eliminate a huge portion of a bipartisan entity. The federal workforce is meant to be bipartisan, to work on the policies being enacted at the top. And the administration is getting rid of anyone that they presume disagrees with them. And a federal worker's oath is to America and to the Constitution, not to the executive branch. And there are still a lot of Americans working in government who are holding the line between us and a complete breakdown of the law. And to them, I hope they know that there are so many out here who support them. I hope they know that their jobs are important. And while much of the discourse has turned against them, I hope that the voices of those who believe in that work will cut through. And that is why season 2 is late. So as one might imagine, it's hard to go through the complete destabilization of your life.
I need to clarify, losing a job ever is devastating.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time for justified and not justified reasons. I, as someone who is in your life in a very intense, deep way, had a front row seat to what you were going through, saw the whiplash, the turmoil, the turbulence of getting bad news and then having that taken back, and the good news immediately squashed. It was horrifying. And going through what you went through, it's not just, oh, I lost a job and like, that's tough. It wasn't based on performance. It wasn't based on anything. And it was part of a larger mission to, again, terrorize. And I think that it needs to be recognized that we are in for more of this this year and for years to come, potentially. It is the result of something larger at play. It is not the same as, being let go during COVID, which again, horrifying. That was hell on earth for a lot of people.
Yeah.
This is targeted. It is scary. It is violent. It is hostile.
Yeah.
And there are times where, as your friend, I've feared for your safety. And I fear for the safety of, again, thousands of workers who are being attacked for absolutely no reason. And I would just simply encourage those of you out there who are, maybe hearing about this for the first time or seeing it on the news, but maybe didn't know exactly what it entailed. I would encourage you all to think extremely critically about how you are consuming news, how you are getting information about the state of the world, about what the administration is doing currently. I have seen Karyn at this job firsthand. I have seen how much she cares for humans, period. It's not that you have this love of other countries and you say, boo America. That's not you. You are a person who is dedicated to good, capital G good. That is blatantly clear to me. And so when someone says that federal workers are worms, I know firsthand that's not true. And I know based on the reactions that I've seen to all of this and the way that your former coworkers have united to support each other, that's not true across the board. So please, so much of my journey in this podcast has been about, I don't like history. I don't care for it. I am now realizing how much value there is in really, really, really understanding how we got here and where we might be going. And history is the indicator.
Yeah.
And also check your facts. I beg of you, check your facts, because we're talking about real human lives. We are not talking about automatons. We are not talking about heartless robots. We are talking about real human people who care, who are devoted to their jobs. And that's all I'll say about that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a heavy thing to talk about on our little genealogy podcast, but it is going to color probably the way that I talk about our episodes over the next season. There is definitely now a break in who I was before this and who I am after. I mean, up is down, black is white. Like it's opposite day everywhere. And I look around at the like absolute gaslighting trying to tell us that like this is the way that the world is. And it is not. It is not the way that the world is or should be. I'm going to probably be drawing from this experience a lot as we talk about history. And also, I don't know if this is, if I'm shoehorning this in or not, but for me, a person who has experienced a lot of privilege in her life, watching this needless cruelty has been the first time I've ever experienced it. I'm sure there are a lot of Native people and persons of color who are like, oh, is the government being unfair and unjust? That must be crazy.
Yep. This is not new in the world. However, it's really new for some of us here.
It is something that I have not personally experienced. I saw it happen and it was horrifying. All that to say, I don't have a job. And as I start to heal from what has happened over the last month, I find myself with a lot of time on my hands. And as I stare down the barrel of unemployment in a historically bad job market, in a region where tens of thousands of newly unemployed people are looking for the same exact jobs, I think my full-time job now is podcast.
Which, hey, kind of cool.
It could be cool. I
It
don't know.
could be cool.
Other people out there might be like, oh, good, more of this.
Yeah.
That being said, it still is a really difficult time. So on top of the massive amounts of research that I have yet to do. So while season 2 will debut on March 17th, we are going to start introducing some new kinds of content in between some of the episodes to give me a little cushion space to keep researching the season. And we are going to include things like conversations with other voices in genealogy and history, similar to the episode that we did with Michael from Roots and Routes. And in other cases, Kim is actually going to take over the episodes. Ooh. Kim, do you want to let us know what you're working on?
Sure, yeah. So one of my priorities is to share with our listeners a little bit more about your process and the intense amount of work that you put into researching our shared, your ancestry, my ancestry, and, writing these stories. You are sharing your research, but you're also crafting a narrative beautifully.
Weaving a tapestry.
Beautifully, if I might say so. So I will be conducting an interview with Karyn, where I get to sort of ask her some questions about the process, about what genealogy means to her, how she got into it, what it means to be examining, our history in a time like right now. In addition to that, I will be doing a couple fun things. We're going to be putting some content on a Patreon, and it's going to be on the goofier side. We might be doing some, star charts for our ancestors and doing some tarot card readings for our ancestors and really examining what an acre actually is.
Yeah, we still don't know.
We still don't know, and how much PBR you really can fit in an acre. And, we've also got, for those of you who don't know, who maybe didn't see our posts on Instagram, our producer, Ben, released an album.
Very exciting stuff.
Of all of the music that he has written for Low Ancestry. So we might be releasing that on here on the podcast, just so everybody can hear some of it. But if you would like to go listen to the whole thing, you can go to Benjamin Mauch's Bandcamp. It is gorgeous, truly incredible. And I will say, we're going to try to stick to our release schedule, but a lot is going to happen.
Yeah.
Please forgive us if we're not exactly on top of it all the time. And we're going to find ways to sort of give ourselves a little bit of breath to space things out so that we don't feel crunched, so that we can, cope with the world in addition to doing all this creating that we love so much.
Yeah. And also, please have grace with us in the emotional sense. I am going to be an emotional basket case.
Yes.
Probably. Mm-hmm. And that might come out at times.
I'm going to be fine.
Just as losing my job feels like I went through a crazy divorce, and I'm going to be a wild card.
Yeah. Yep.
So watch out.
Yeah.
So we're excited to roll out that new content, but of course we still have our flagship episodes, which for this season happens to be all about Kim's ancestry.
Hey.
And I'll tell you what, I've had a lot of fun already putting these together. It feels very different. It's not boring.
Okay, I've got her.
I already know or feel that it's been very different from my season. We're going to talk about wishful linking and genealogy and the whiskey dynasty that you're actually not related to.
Bummer.
We'll talk about Missouri Reconstruction politics.
I don't know if there's a string of words that you could have said that I am less interested in.
What's crazy is I think you're really going to love it.
I probably will, but that's how this goes. Is
That's how it goes.
I say poo poo and you say, are you sure?
No, but hear me out. And then we're also going to talk about a feud that ended in murder.
Murder.
So, Kim, how are you feeling about this upcoming season?
I'm so excited. I'm really glad that we are getting back to a place where we feel ready for all of this. I want to, again, thank our listeners for being patient. We hope that you enjoyed all the bonus episodes that we put out after season 1. We will definitely be, looking into ways to add fun episodes in between our regular season 2 stuff. So stay tuned. Thank you. Yeah, I'm feeling ready.
Yeah, I can't wait to share it with you and with the royal you. Also, thank you for listening to me go on about my plight. So here's to brighter times ahead, hopefully. Although Kim actually rolled her ankle last night to also just ring in 2025.
I don't know if we've ever talked about this before. Karyn and I met playing music.
Yeah.
I am still a musician, and last night I played a show in a cave. I did not slip in the cave. I slipped outside on my way to the car at the very end of the night, and I now have a baseball-sized knot on my ankle.
Yeah.
So if the layout of these upcoming episodes is a little weird, it's because I have my foot propped up, and I'm not going to apologize for that.
Yeah, and you shouldn't.
No, I won't.
You shouldn't. So here's to brighter times starting now.
Starting right now.
Yeah. And we will see everyone for season 2, episode 1 on March 17th. Bye.
Bye.